Hi everyone, it's V and welcome back to Critical Healing Moment. This is a channel where I talk about healing, social work, and social justice and social movements. And in today's video, I am going to be reacting to a news article. I'm going to read to you all and react to an article about social work internships. Oh, as you can see, my background is slightly different. It's a little bit more put together. I actually got this from a group of my clients. I ran a group at an elementary school and they put this together for me and the other intern on our last day. It's so cute. Okay, so let's get started actually. Okay, so the title of the article that I am reading to you all today is, and I have my computer here, School of Social Work Students Walk Out of Classes, Demand Payment for Internships. This article was published in the Michigan Daily and it was published March 24th, 2022. So just a few weeks ago from me filming this video. Okay, so I'm going to read the article and then I'm going to pause in between and give my reactions to it, and hopefully I won't talk too much and be concise and not repetitive. Okay, so the article goes, graduate students at the University of Michigan School of Social Work walked out of their classes Monday morning and gathered onto the diag to rally for payments for placements. This is a student campaign demanding that the university begin compensating Master of Social Work students for their internship work. Around 80 members of the campus community attended the walkout. Okay, so first of all, I will say I am not a student at the University of Michigan School of Social Work. It is one of the top, I think the top school of social work in the country in the United States. I remember that from doing my research on programs, and this is about the students organizing on campus. I think that it is really great that students are organizing. I think that organizing is a part of social work. It has historically been a part of social work and is the root of social work actually, even though in my oppressive origins of social work video I do talk about sort of the darker aspects of the beginnings of social work. The beginning of social work was actually rooted in community organizing and improving things at the systemic and institutional level. So that is very much a really big part of social work's history, and it's not really as popular as a part of social work is today because we have kind of gone to the clinical route. Anyways, I will continue my reaction. In 2017, MSW students, social work alumni, and social workers started a petition for the fair compensation for their field work. Most recently, in January, MSW students submitted a petition with over 300 student signatures to Social Work Dean Joseph Himlay and other social work administrators calling on the university to fund their degree-required internships. Currently, the majority of MSW fieldwork positions are unpaid, even though the Council on Social Work Education requires that MSW students across the U.S. complete 900 hours of fieldwork during their master's program. Okay, I'll just pause right there. If you are new to social work, don't know much about social work, or looking into going into social work school, somebody that you have to pay attention to is the Council on Social Work Education, or the CSWE. This is the accrediting body of social work education, meaning that they are the institution that says, that like puts the stamp of approval on if this is a valid social work program. So they have competencies. There's 9 competencies in social work that each educational program has to hit. They have to cover in their curriculum these 9 parts. While there are places where they kind of are lacking, especially in terms of like diversity and equity and that kind of thing, the CSWE is essentially one of the highest bodies in social work. There are also the bodies that do the licensing exam and also the National Association of Social Workers. Those are all also sort of governing bodies of the field. SSW spokeswoman Lisa Raycraft confirmed that at the university, non-advanced standing MSW students must complete 912 hours of field work to get their degree. However, students with advanced standing, those who come into the university with a BSW, only have to complete 684 hours during their 3-semester program. Okay, so the article explains the difference between advanced standing and non-advanced standing, so I'm not going to go over that. However, what this is saying is that students complete between 684 and 912 unpaid working hours. Okay, that's what I want to point out. At the protests, several MSW students expressed their frustrations with the lack of compensation for their fieldwork, which they claim has impacted their mental health and ability to afford housing. Angelica Abraham, an MSW student, and one of the speakers at the walkout, told the crowd that balancing a paid job with her unpaid fieldwork causes a lot of stress. Abraham says she is currently working to complete her fieldwork at Kids Talk Children's Advocacy Center in Detroit, which involves an 85-mile commute. Yes, a lot of, if not the majority of MSW students are doing some sort of work while they're attending classes and doing their field work or their internship. There are some people who are working full-time and then doing all this stuff, and then people like me, I work part-time. So there's a range of things that people are doing to support themselves while they are in school. This is because grad school is expensive, and in my sort of experience and knowledge of things, an MSW is not a master's program that typically gives out like grants, or people have like TA or even research positions for MSWs. I feel like that's not really typical in the field because social work the emphasis is on the practical application, not necessarily on the teaching or on the research. I think that, if you can and it's possible, one of the things that can be really advantageous is if you work at an agency already, if you're doing your MSW and doing your internship at your place of employment. There are all kinds of different policies around that, and they differ from school to school, but I think it does make things a lot easier. There's probably like less of a commute. You kind of already know people there, you know the policies and procedures, and you might get paid for that time because you already work at the agency. I'm tired of having to juggle 2 part-time jobs on top of classwork, on top of field work, and with an 85-mile round trip multiple times a week. Abraham said, I'm tired of working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Yes, I also feel like I work 6 days a week, kind of combining everything that I do, whether it's my job, field, and then classes. I am like doing something 6 days a week, at least 6 to 8 hours a day each day. Thursdays is my day off, but on Thursdays that's when I do my rest of my schoolwork, and I do like errands, I do laundry, I do all sorts of other things at home that I need to do, and usually that doesn't include things that I used to do kind of previously when I was only working 40 hours a week at a regular job, things like exercising, things like meal planning, cooking. I don't even do those things anymore because I'm so busy and I'm so tired. I do think that aspect of time management is a huge part of how internships impact your mental health. And because people have to work on top of going to school, that just adds, less time for you to cram everything that you have to do, adding more stress. Other students within the school, I keep saying School of Social Work because that's how my school calls it, but other students within the social work school shared Abraham's frustration. A survey conducted by the P4P leaders found that 83% of respondents worked additional jobs on top of their required work. In an email to the Michigan Daily, Dan Fisher, Assistant Dean of Field Education in the SSW, wrote that unpaid field work does not violate the U.S. Fair Labor and Standards Act, which helps protect workers' rights. Fisher emphasized that the fieldwork is primarily intended to academically support the MSW program by providing students with hands-on experience before receiving their degree. Okay, there are things that I have to say about the Fair Labor Standards Act, or the FLSA. I recently did a paper on labor rights for domestic workers. Domestic workers meaning people like maids, babysitters, nannies, house cleaners, that type of thing. I did a paper of literature review on the rights of domestic workers for school, and I found that policies such as the FLSA, the Fair Labor and Standards Act, do not cover domestic workers, and they also, I think, don't cover agricultural workers either. And my paper was specifically on like immigrant and Latino workers, especially undocumented workers. And so to kind of hold the FLSA as sort of your standard is like not a great standard to hold it by, because there's already inequity built into that policy. It's a federal policy that provides worker protection for certain industries. And this is a remnant of sort of like the New Deal era policies and like I think progressive era policies that added a lot of protections for workers, things like 40-hour work week, overtime pay, that type of thing. That's when that period of history is when these policies were developed. However, certain industries were excluded from the policies because those industries typically employed Black workers. That, along with like Social Security and other types of welfare programs, they just excluded groups of people that were like majority Black. And today, what I find interesting is that it excludes mostly immigrant workers and Latino workers. And so I think that these industries have just gone from exploiting like one population to the other. Anyways, I don't think that just because it is legal that it is the just thing to do, especially when you're thinking about the social work lens and the social work values. Social workers have to abide by a number of different guidelines when making decisions and creating policies and doing clinical decisions. On one hand, you do have what's legal. What are the legal standards? What are the laws? There are certain laws that you have to follow as a social worker. And then there's the Social Work Code of Ethics, which is sort of the code of conduct for social workers and the values that we have to act by in our work. And then there's also other kinds of policies, such as the policy of the agencies or the departments or the institutions where you work. So those are things that you have to consider when you're making decisions as a social worker. Just looking at what's legal is not always what's the most ethical per social work standards. And I think this is one of the cases where just because something is legal because it follows the FLSA, the Fair Labor and Standards Act, I'm going to try not use acronyms, I guess. Just because it follows that bare minimum legal standard doesn't mean that it is congruent or it is compatible with social work values. Students are unlicensed professionals and would not be able to engage in MSW level work, Fisher wrote. Field placements also provide opportunities for students to discover new ideas or to think about themselves and their own values, prejudices, and attitudes towards others while learning to manage emotions and feelings within real-world settings. I don't think anything that's said here is untrue. It's just that there are people doing all sorts of stuff in other fields who may not have like the license or the credentials or whatever in other industries as interns, but in those fields they're still getting paid. So I don't know, moot point. Other programs at the university provide stipends for students to compensate for their work. The Ford School of Public Policy offers funding for Master of Public Policy students with low-paying or unpaid internships. 60% of MPP students receive funding from the Ford School partnerships or other resources. Similarly, the University of Michigan Law School guarantees up to $6,500 stipend for second-year law students who take summer internships with government agencies or public interest organizations. MSW students are not the only master's students who are not paid for fieldwork. Fisher wrote that other master's programs in the health sciences at the university also do not provide monetary compensation for clinical work. I think this is just another case where why are you comparing MSW internships to like a low standard? It shouldn't be that just because other internships are not paid that social work students don't have to get paid. It's that every student doing an internship should get paid for their work, especially if they are doing very important work that is very valuable to humans, to their human clients. Things like clinical work, things like nursing, things like education. These are things that are so valuable to our society that we just like don't pay for because we're dumb. No other health sciences professional program at UM, including medicine, nursing, dentistry, and pharmacy, pays students for clinical training, recognizing the critical impact of experiential learning, Fisher wrote. I'll say the other thing is that these other fields, medicine, maybe not nursing, dentistry, pharmacy, if you're going to come out of school as a doctor, you're going to be making a lot more money to be able to like pay off all those loans and those debts. Not if you're going to become a social worker. I'm not saying that social workers can't get paid a lot. I think that social workers need to be more picky about the jobs that they take on and have a higher standard for themselves in terms of compensation and salary. But I think that the average for social work is much lower than the averages for medicine, dentistry, and pharmacy. Just another example of how we don't value social work. P4P co-chair Ari, hope I'm saying that right, Davey told the crowd it's not fair for the university to fund internships for graduate students in other schools, but to refuse to pay MSW students for their required work. Okay, so yeah, why do public policy and law students get paid for their internships? But then again, those graduate programs where they're working with people like medicine, nursing, social work, they're not getting paid. Like, why are we not paying for people who are helping professionals? Why not pay social work students doing some of the same work that MPP students do? Davey say, we are not taking this mistreatment sitting down, we're fighting. Social work students and social workers also do public policy. That's kind of the macro side. So even in that case, those internships should be getting paid. In 2022, the university invested over $54 million in the law school, which has 313 enrolled 1L students. I don't know what 1L is. And about $29 million in the social work school, which has 500 to 700 enrolled MSW students, depending on the term. So this is saying that there's more money invested in the law school, even though there's less students, than what's invested in the social work school, who has more students enrolled. Matt Dargay, the social work school representative on Central Student Government and co-chair of P4P, says the university's underinvestment of the SSW might be one reason MSW students do not receive compensation for internships, while law and other graduate students do. Social work, not just across the university system, but across the whole country, is underinvested in because it's difficult to run a profit off of it, Dargay says. Social work really is about caring for people fundamentally. Ahead of the March 22nd CSG meeting, Dargay sponsored a resolution that would have CSG formally endorse P4P's goal to support equitable payment for field work completed by MSW students. CSG will be voting on the resolution at their meeting on Tuesday. Though the CSG resolution and P4P's previous petition did not specify a pay rate for MSW students, Dargay shared his personal thoughts on what equitable compensation might look like. What I'm asking for is an equivalent of $20 an hour, Dargay said. MSW student Harrison Parker, who is graduating from the social work school in July, is currently completing his field work with a social work school professor. Though he does receive a stipend for his work, he said his spouse is the primary earner in their household. If I didn't have her, I don't know how I would live. I don't know how I would put food on the table, Parker said. Yeah, so food insecurity is something that a lot of graduate students face. At my university, they have started a food pantry for graduate students because it is that bad, okay? And there are ways to qualify for food stamps as a graduate student. You have to kind of meet certain qualifications. Like, in order to qualify for food stamps as a graduate student, I believe you have to work part-time at least 20 hours per week, and you might have to have a kid, a dependent. You might have to have a dependent. So I think that's how you qualify for food stamps as a graduate student. But that also might vary state to state because SNAP is a state-run public assistance program, I believe. Don't quote me on that. At Monday's protests, MSW students stressed the financial insecurity they face for the lack of compensation for their fieldwork, but they remain optimistic about the progress being made. In their press release about the walkout, P4P announced that they had partnered with social work school administrators to launch the Joint Task Force on Stipends to look into how other universities compensate social work students for their field work. The creation of this task force was one of the goals outlined in the petition they submitted in January. There's two things I want to make a comment about here is that it is very important to stay optimistic when you are organizing for something and celebrate those very small wins. It's what's going to keep you going. The second thing that I will say is that it is very difficult to organize at a university because the time that people spend at a university, either like 1 to like 4 years in an undergrad, is a very short amount of time, and sometimes organizing takes a long time and it takes centuries. There are things that centuries we've been organizing for that we have not achieved yet as a society. So that is one of the things that I remember when I was in undergrad and I was doing sort of student, I guess you could call it activist work or student leadership work, is that when I was a senior, something that one of the administrators at the Multicultural Center said was like, it's just so sad when we have people graduating because these student leaders who've like kind of built up for 4 years leave and then they kind of have to start over with a new cohort of student leaders. So if you are organizing on a student campus, I think that it's very important for you to have sustainability by always identifying leaders from younger classes and building them up and making sure that they have those opportunities to build those skills and even to like surpass your own skills. I think that that is the way that we are going to be able to be successful in organizing on campuses. That being said, I do not myself currently, I'm not active in my university's anything because I don't have time to. Still, Darge says he believes that there is more work for P4P and all MSW students to do. Collaborating with the Graduate Employees Organization was suggested as a possible next step. In order to really put this into the region's attention, we need to take it to the next level, Darge said. A great way to do this is for us MSW students to sign up as members of the GEO, the Graduate Employees Organization. The walkout might not be the last time that we make our voices heard in a public sort of fashion. If that's what we need to do, then that's what we'll do. And that is the end of the article. Yeah, I just wanted to share this bit of social work news with you all, and I think that is such an important topic that I've heard even among my own peers at the university that I attend, that internships should be paid, or we should get a stipend, or we should be reimbursed for certain expenses that we incur for our internships, like commuting and parking and that kind of thing. The last thing I will say about what providing paid internships would do in order to address equity in social work is that social work has historically been a field that is dominated by middle-class white women. That is sort of the origin of social work in terms of who were the first social work leaders, the people who are actually considered social workers. Jane Addams, those were middle-class white women, and they did it on their volunteer time because they had other means to support their living. To this day, the people who have the access to graduate school and the access to the not only the education, but then also what comes after that, the licensing, the credentials, and then the access to the compensation that comes at those higher levels of validity of the field. The cost of a master's is a barrier to being able to achieve all of these things and to access all these other opportunities. And there are people who come from marginalized backgrounds doing social work type jobs, or not even jobs, but just doing it in their community, things like community organizing or coordinating resources for your community and like organizing like food drives and coat drives and being the person in the community that people go to for emotional support and social support and that kind of thing. Those are things that social workers do, and these are things that people do who are not social workers, and they could go to grad school and also build on those skills and contribute to the field in terms of providing their perspective on how things are done in different kinds of communities and different cultures to advance the field. But the cost of an MSW is such a high barrier, and I think if we remove that barrier by providing stipends and paid internships for MSW students. I think that would be at least one strategy to addressing inequity in the field and bringing in more people of color, more low-income people, more just historically marginalized people who have to have paid work in other ways in order to sustain themselves, even if their real passion and strength is in social work. Okay, so that is it for today's video. I hope you like it. Let me know if you want me to do more sort of like article reviews and reactions. I thought this was a really fun reaction to do. Okay, leave a comment, like, subscribe, all the things, and I'll see you in the next one.